Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity, the podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world with self-care strategies from Chinese medicine. I'm your host, Brody Welch, here to support you on your journey of health, happiness, and personal evolution. Welcome to today's show. My guest today is Amy Krasner, who is a really inspiring woman who I had the pleasure of meeting recently, who supports women who are struggling with low energy, digestive issues, and difficulty losing weight. She is a holistic nutritionist and natural chef, and she's helped hundreds of women improve their health by understanding how to nourish their bodies. In addition to nutrition consulting, Amy supports women to create a healthier relationship with food through eating psychology and intuitive eating methodologies. Her approach is 80% mindset and 20% nutrition to help women overcome physical and emotional blocks that have held them back from success with other diet and exercise approaches. Amy and I met at a workshop a few months ago that was ostensibly about storytelling, but to call it a storytelling workshop kind of sounds a little bit like something you do at summer camp, as opposed to the deep self-reflection and processing that we had to do in order to figure out what parts of our story are actually of service to other people and to refine what our most powerful messages are. We really delved into our roots, our path, and why we're driven to do the work that we're currently doing. So I feel like I got to know Amy pretty well in just a couple of days, and I'm just thrilled to have her here on the show. Amy, welcome to A Healthy Curiosity.
Hi, Brody. It's so nice to be with you again.
So I would love for you to share with our listeners today a bit of your story and how you got to be doing what you're doing and why you're so passionate about it.
Wonderful. I'd love to do that. So I first got into nutrition because of my own health concerns and symptoms that I was struggling with on a daily basis that were really holding me back. And it was about when I was in high school, I started to develop some digestive issues. And by the time I got to college, they had gotten worse. I also had really bad eczema. I had anxiety, and I had lots of different things going on with my health. And I had been an athlete for most of my life, so I'd been pretty active. And in college, I was active as well. And I ended up having a little injury that prevented me from exercising. So what happened was I started to feel like I was gaining weight, and then I had all these other symptoms, which led me to go visit with a nutritionist. And prior to that, I had been to Western medicine doctors, and what they had said for my digestion was, just take this. We're not sure exactly what's going on. There wasn't a clear diagnosis. And I just intuitively knew that there was something else that was happening and that it was linked to what I was eating, or knew that there was something else that was really causing those symptoms. So I ended up meeting with a nutritionist. I found way more information than I thought I would. It wasn't just about weight loss. It was far more about understanding what foods worked for my body. My digestion did start to get better. And that's kind of what set me on the path to coaching women in these specific areas. Now, even after coaching women for 4 years in private practice with holistic nutrition, what I started to realize was that my digestion wasn't fully healed, and that I was still concerned about my weight, or I was really cautious about what I ate. And it was really stressful for me. And what I started to realize was that a lot of what was missing, or the big piece that was missing for me, was the mindset shift. So I knew all of the information. I knew what I was supposed to be eating. I was very well versed in nutrition, but I was still making some choices that were not self-honoring choices for me. And I was also still experiencing digestive distress at the same time. So bloating, really bad stomach aches, and still was not feeling energized, to say the least. I had a lot of low energy. So what I started to trace back was, when did my digestive issues start? And they actually started when I was experiencing depression and anxiety when I was in high school, and just really fluctuating moods and just not really feeling like myself. And that correlated with my own digestive issues starting. And what I started to realize when I delve into eating psychology and into intuitive eating was that there's this really big missing link in the nutrition and alternative medicine world. So our thoughts and our mindset have a really big impact on our wellness, on our stress, and on our physical health as well. And that's kind of how I got to where I am today.
Awesome. Well, first of all, good for you for not just deciding way back then that paving over a symptom or your whole set of symptoms with drugs was going to work out for you, right? I mean,
Hmm.
because really, in approaching your symptoms as something to eradicate, you really miss the opportunity to discover how you can ultimately get at the root of everything that's been going on.
Yeah, and the Bandaid approach was not working for me.
Yeah. And at the same time, it's like that in the work that you're doing, it's like you're yeah, am I right that you're not having people take 10,000 lab tests and figure out their food allergies and figure out like what all the missing nutrients are? Like you're not approaching it from a from figuring out what specifically people need to do differently. It's more about helping people clue into how they react to food and like just paying attention.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I do some lab testing in my practice. However, that used to be more of a focus, the functional nutrition side of things. And similar to what I found with my own health is you can know all of that stuff, but a lot of those programs are very restrictive and they're not sustainable. So instead of coming from a place of, let's cut all these foods out that are on your food sensitivity test, or you have this condition, so you have to cut out all these foods, coming from a place of really like, what is it that makes me feel good? And I do have different methods of figuring that out. And if we need to look at, some labs, or if you're working with another alternative medicine practitioner, I think that's really important too. But more so, that can all become very overwhelming. So what I work with a lot is women who have done a lot of different diets or tried a lot of alternative medicine practices and still haven't come to their best self, or still don't feel healthy after trying all of those things. And usually in that case, there is some type of mindset component that is holding them back.
Well, I'd love to talk about mindset and first of all what that means to you, but I also want to just really echo the fact that there's so much overwhelming information, quote unquote, out there about food and what's healthy. And really, from a Chinese medicine standpoint, it's the question is not are eggs good or bad, right? Is wheat good
Hmm.
or bad? It's much more nuanced than that in terms of first of all, who are you? What kind of a condition do you have going on? How strong is your digestive system? What season of the year is it where you are? All sorts of other questions that determine whether a given food is a good idea or not. And so just that idea that even when you have the lab test that says like, oh yeah, well it showed up that you're sensitive to these random foods, the prescription is not avoid those foods for the rest of your life. I'm much more interested in how can we strengthen your digestive fire, your digestive capacity, such that you're not so limited for the rest of your life. And just just I really want to emphasize that there is what is to get out of the binary of good or bad, which is so reductionistic, but instead thinking about kind of like who we are, what we have going on, and because that's going to vary, depending on really all of that. And I know that, and also dosage, right? Like there's things like wheat, which is or gluten, which contains hard to digest proteins, but that doesn't mean that you can't have it once in a while if it's not something that you are sensitive to.
Hmm.
It's the kind of thing that having it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day of your life is different than having something occasionally. So it's like I like to keep that in mind as well, like to not demonize any particular food, even for yourself, even if you know that it's not necessarily awesome for your body, like that, just that 80/20 rule in terms of for the most part, sticking to what you know is going to be good for you. Would,
Hmm.
would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I think especially coming from a space where I did have a lot of digestive issues, I do still have to listen to my body and identify like some foods just don't work that well for me. So then it's a question of, well, how often am I having it and how much am I having? And, does that work for me or does it make sense for me if my goal essentially is to feel my best so I can show up in my best way for myself, then how is it that I want to feel? And I kind of use that as a little bit of a barometer as well. Some people do have to completely avoid, but I do think we have to get really careful about, before we know it, we're scared of everything. We're scared of
Yeah.
calories, we're scared of fat, we're scared of wheat, we're scared of dairy, we're scared of everything, and it leaves us with a lot of stress around food, which really takes the pleasure away from food, and the stress itself is far more damaging to the body than maybe eating a little bit of something or your food touching something that it should.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. And then, of course, the fact that when we're under stress, that impedes our ability to digest itself. And so it can be this really circular process that like,
Mhm.
if we can relax around food and have there maybe not be so many rules, it can actually benefit our how our bodies are capable of handling what we're giving them.
100%. Yeah, I agree with that.
So let's circle back to mindset. First of all, like that's a common word in various circles. And so, how are you using the word mindset, and what's important about mindset when it comes to eating?
I was actually thinking about this today because I thought you might ask me that question. So I'm glad that you are. And it's great for me to break it down for myself again, too. So for me, within the context of life, our mindset is determining several different things, but essentially how we perceive the world or how we perceive life. So, how we perceive stress, how we perceive different situations in our life. And depending on the way that our thought patterns are programmed, that is going to determine how we receive and take in and respond to information. So, that's a little bit broad, but when we come down to it, it's that all of our actions that we take have to start somewhere. So they start with a thought. And if we have certain mindsets that are in place from our childhood or certain fears that are coming in the way, our thoughts are going to be influenced by that. So in a more simplistic term, when it comes to food, when I talk about mindset, there is a spirituality component to it. There is this connectedness component to it, but what it really comes down to is every single food choice that you make starts from a thought. So you can think of like your food choice as a behavior, but or sorry, it as a yeah, as an action that you take. But in order to take that action, it's going to be influenced by your thought process. So if you think that a food is bad for you, if you think that you're only supposed to eat at certain times during the day, or if you think that this food makes me fat, or this food hurts my digestion, some of that might be true, but all of that is going to influence the way that we eat. And so, really helping to get out of this overwhelm and stress around food, mindset really does come down to stress as well, and how is that influencing our choices too. So, is that clear? Does that make
Yeah, well, it
sense?
certainly sounds like you're saying that our food choices are behaviors, and
Mhm.
that those behaviors that it starts in the mind in terms of what we decide to put into our bodies and the reasons behind it and the stories behind it. And so we can have belief, and it sounds like you're alluding to the fact that we can have beliefs about the food and what it might do to us, but also beliefs, or emotions maybe that are the reason for wanting to eat in the first place?
Yeah, definitely. And once I started to get in a space where I was using different techniques, so these are some techniques that I use with my clients, but when I talk about this shift of focusing, I was focusing on nutrition and then I started to focus more on mindset. some of the tools are daily meditation. They are journaling. It is gratitude practice, affirmations, and those types of things started to help to shift my mind or shift my brain. And these tools are really setting a different approach for the way that we look at food too, and things that I work on with my clients as well. So those are some of the tools that we use. And then understanding ourselves as an eater. So there's been so much focus on what to eat, and not enough focus on how we eat. Do we eat when we're distracted? Because that's a mindset thing, is if we're focusing on something else and not our food, then that's going to affect the way that we digest our food. So mindful eating is definitely a huge part of what I work with. And then you have intuitive eating. Are we listening to our bodies? And so yeah, there's a lot of different modalities that fall into this mindset with around food, and our belief systems definitely start to influence our food choices.
Yeah. I think that what you were saying about gratitude and meditation, like having those sound like things that you do way before you approach food itself. It's something that is in place in your life apart from eating, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And really what I find in my coaching groups is that all of the self-care tools that you could possibly imagine don't amount to anything if people don't feel like they have the right to use them.
Hmm.
And so getting, like things like gratitude and affirmations and meditation, what that can do is set us up for being in the right mindset all day long to make the choices that are aligned with our deepest truth.
You couldn't have said it better.
Quick announcement about a mind body detox day that I'm going to be hosting on April 14th, which is a Saturday. In Chinese medicine philosophy, the energies of the seasons are reflected in our bodies and minds and emotions as well. And the season of the spring is associated with the liver, which is all about new growth. And also detoxifying our lives from what no longer serves us. And this happens on a mental, emotional, and spiritual as well as physical level. So I'm inviting you to join me for a day where we're going to align with the chi of spring and support our livers so that we can handle stress better, so that we can support our courage, clarity, creativity, and self-expression, keep ourselves in rhythm digestively, reproductively, diurnally, and adapt and evolve into who we are becoming next. We're going to be doing Qigong, breathing, meditation. We're going to be getting into dietary and herbal tips for the change of seasons, as well as acupoints for stress and stress-related problems. We'll go into EFT and tapping for limiting beliefs, and we'll play with essential oils. If you want in, head over to brodywelch.com/mind-body-detox and claim your spot. Hope to see you there. And also, if you love live events, mark your calendars for my retreat that I'm going to be hosting in Mexico at Present Moment Retreat Center, February 16th through 23rd of 2019. That's next year. Get out of the cold and wet and dreary and come hang out on the beach with me. It's going to be super fun. Details soon. But Mind Body Detox Day, April 14th. Would love to have you join me. Now back to today's show. I am almost embarrassed to admit this, but I am really resistant to mindful eating,
Mm.
despite the fact that I meditate every day and I'm committed to watching my thoughts. I definitely grew up with the not ever having enough time to eat, being in a rush from going from activity to activity, wolfing things down, eating really quickly was some of those early patterns that I still am working to overcome by doing things like putting down my fork between bites and talking to people. But and I definitely still can succumb to the productivity mindset of like, oh well, I need to get back to work, so I don't really have time to just like put my phone away and stop, like
Mhm.
being in some way connected to thinking. And it's really hard for me. to just, and I it's a practice. It's something that I've actually been trying to do more of lately, but it is tough to overcome some of that. Do you have any advice for me?
Yeah, and that's something that is very common. And one of the questions that I ask when I do an intake session is, "Are you a fast, a moderate, or a slow eater?" And if someone says fast or moderate, we really do start there, because if we're eating quickly, then we are usually checked out, and it's very hard to change our food behaviors when we're not actually present. And
Right. You have to be present in order to have any sort of conscious, like if you're not present, you're on autopilot. And
right.
if you're on autopilot, you're doing it the same way you've always done it, which means no change.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So what I would say is, instead of trying to eat every single meal mindfully, I would pick one meal a day to start with and just break it down a little bit in that way. So maybe figuring out which meal would be the least stressful for you to, sit down and make a conscious choice to turn off. Whether that's dinner, or lunch or breakfast, just picking one meal. And I use it as a meditation. So when we start to think of the benefits of mindful eating, we actually get to enjoy our food more. So if someone's rushing through their meal, uh, and a client will tell me, "Well, I'm a foodie and I don't want to give up foods," and I'm like, "Well, if you're rushing through your meal, you're not even tasting it, you're not even getting to enjoy the flavor." So there's a big pleasure component with mindful eating, and then there's definitely the benefits for digestion as well. So digestion really begins in our mouth. If we don't chew our food properly, if we don't have enough time for the saliva in our mouth to break down the food, then it really puts a lot of pressure on our digestive tract in order to break those foods down.
Yes, the stomach does not have teeth. It's
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and it's, yeah, that's really good advice. It's like I feel like it's really easy to be mindful and present with food when I'm eating with other people, because I'm present to the conversation, I'm present to the people, and therefore the
Hmm.
experience. But it's the entrepreneurial, get there's always something to do, and so yeah, or something to be thinking about, or it's like I don't have not giving myself enough time to take a break and look at, read the New York Times online or check Facebook or like something like that. So I'm doing those things while I'm eating,
Hmm.
but even, from Chinese medicine, the spleen and stomach, the systems that corresponds with digestion of food, are also responsible for the digestion of information. And it's one of the things that I recommend to people all the time in terms of like, don't digest two things at once. And certainly not the state of the world. It's like, that's really not going to be a recipe for happy digestion.
Mm.
So it's like, I know all this stuff, but it's bridging that gap that has been, I think, tricky for me, because it doesn't seem like there is a payoff. And so like I love that. And this is, again, this is funny. This is why coaches need coaches, Amy. That I'm like, it's so easy for me to help other people identify what's important or what the payoff is, and to kind of like find a different reward. And like, it's, yes, definitely, I'm sure I would enjoy my lunch a lot more if I actually were present for it. So thank you for that little bit of coaching
Yeah, and
advice.
if you are currently right now taking no time for lunch, even if you started taking 5 minutes for lunch and then maybe extending that to 10 minutes for lunch, it doesn't have to be this whole, 30-minute break, but just even slowly incrementing, like, can you take 5 minutes for lunch, and really be conscious about that and give yourself 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'm pretty good about that actually. But
Yeah.
the idea though that there's an incentive to eat quickly, because then I get to go back to work, and
Hmm.
recognizing that actually I should just go off the clock for a half an hour, regardless of how fast I eat, because I'm still not allowed to go back to work
Hmm.
until that break is over. So
Hmm.
yeah, working on that. I know one of the other things that you help people with is developing positive self talk. And that's definitely something that I hear is a major struggle for people who have the vicious inner critic and who have a lot of negative self-talk going on, especially when so much of our self-esteem is tied to our weight and what we look like. And eating can be just part of that same continuum, and it can be a place of where we really can be mean to ourselves And I speak from personal experience here as well. So I'm curious as to what you can tell us about shifting away from negative self-talk, and especially around eating and food and our bodies.
Yeah, I mean, this is so prevalent in for most women and for men as well. And I definitely grew up being really hard on myself in a lot of areas in my life. And so when you apply that to food and weight, it can become really nasty and it can become really pervasive. And this is also part of where mindfulness comes in when we start to recognize that the first step is awareness that we're doing it, and recognize that we are attaching to a thought, and then that thought leads to another thought. So the thought might be, oh, I ate that cookie, I shouldn't have eaten that cookie, why did I do that, I have no willpower, this is why I gain weight, I can't get anything right, something along those lines. Or it could be, a version of that. And so what it really comes down to is really starting to recognize that being hard on ourselves doesn't actually change our behavior for the next time. It keeps us stuck in this vicious cycle, because when you tell yourself that you can't have something or shouldn't have something, or when you're hard on yourself, there's no positive reinforcement to make a change. So we're actually just digging ourselves further into that hole, and that actually leads us, once we feel bad again, because we feel bad that we did something and then we were mad at ourselves about it, so then we feel bad, we go back to the same behavior because we triggered it again by
Right.
feeling
It's
bad about ourselves.
comforting. Yeah. And that's
Mhm.
really the magic of self-compassion, I think, is being able to get out of that loop, because most of us, like, we think that we need to be mentally beaten up in order to change our behavior. And as you just pointed out, that's actually a fallacy. That's not how it works. And that we actually get back on track much faster when we can use self-compassion.
Yeah, that simple tool alone, and it's a practice and it takes time. However, I've seen even in 2 weeks with clients, once we start working on this specifically when it comes to eating and then body image as well, is just, take this next week and notice what are the types of thoughts, what are the types of things that you're saying to yourself. And then I have them, check in with that. And then I have them look at, if your best friend was in the same situation, or if they ate something that maybe they felt like they shouldn't have, what would you say to them? Would you tell them, like, why did you do that? You always do that. What's wrong with you? You have no willpower. You most likely wouldn't say that to your best friend. And if you did, you wouldn't have a best friend anymore, right? So what would you say to them? And then how could you say that to yourself? So, it's just one piece of pizza. I ate a really healthy lunch. I know I'm gonna make a good choice tomorrow. I'm allowed to enjoy this piece of pizza. It's not that big of a deal. You're doing great. Like, just saying really nice, positive things to yourself. And within 2 weeks, I have clients who, because they don't have that negative self-talk, they start to make choices that are more self-honoring. So instead of eating 3 pieces of pizza, they have 1 and they enjoy it and they don't have the guilt and shame with it. And then it actually stops them from wanting more. And they're surprised by it. They're like, wait, how does that work? And it's because they're not feeling so bad about it anymore, which drives them to keep eating foods that are not good for them. So if you
Yeah.
feel bad, then you're going to choose foods that are not that are in line with that as well.
Oh, yeah, exactly. It reinforces that vibration of
Mhm.
that, like, if you don't feel like you are any good or worthy of love, or then it's
Mhm.
like you're not necessarily going to honor the inner divinity in yourself with with really healthy stuff. Probably
Mhm.
going to gravitate towards things that reinforce that negative feeling.
Yeah, definitely.
You mentioned body image, and I know that is something that I always wonder how much more energy would be freed up in the world if women didn't have this ridiculous, unachievable standard to live up to that's perpetuated in the media about what our bodies are supposed to look like, and trying to get there. It seems like I could just imagine every time a woman compares herself to this ideal, myself included. I absolutely am still feel there's something linked to um, competence that has to do with like being in control of my weight or how my body shows up in the world, that I realize is total bullshit, but I still buy into it. And I know it's really common that women kind of like, they're like, this isn't even my value. This isn't even, like, I don't, if you ask me point blank, like, do you think that you need to look like a supermodel? Like, most women would say no. And yet there still is this striving to achieve an unattainable standard that really, it's like, wow, what if we were all doing something else with that energy? Like, what if we were putting it towards, I don't know, like literally anything that would be better. So how can women stop um doing this? How can we have a healthier sense of body image, even in the face of it, like our cultural messaging around this unattainable standard?
hmm Yeah, there's a few different practices for that. One practice that I really love is doing a body gratitude practice. And it just brings us back to reality of how incredible the body is, and that every single person's body is different and unique. And that, without this body, we wouldn't be able to have all of these experiences. So part of it's gratitude, which doesn't take away this image piece of it, but it does bring a lot more appreciation and bring us down from attaching to this thought of that we need to look a certain way in order to be a certain way. And I also work on it from a side of worthiness. So I have my clients really look at themselves and see what their worth is and what it is that they have to offer in this world, and bring them back to how incredible they truly are. And there's this quote that I love that has to do with that we are also fixated on the 1%. Like, our body is only 1% of our existence, and 99% of us is our soul and our spirit and who we truly are. And we're also fixated on this 1%. So that's kind of just going back to what you said about how we're so hyper focused on it. So really getting back in touch with that 99% and that light and love that we are, and the truth of who we are, without putting ourselves down all the time. And really, each woman that heals her story with her body image and starts to recognize the power that she truly has, is actually healing a much larger issue in our culture and society. It's taking away from this cultural obsession with body and coming back to this humanity of who we really are. And so it's not only, I think really it is about not doing it just for yourself. There's got to be something bigger than it. And if it is important for someone to change this cultural story, or if they, know that it's not really the truth, then doing it for other women, like doing it for your daughters, that's actually one of the biggest motivators that women that come to me have, is I don't want my daughters to be stressed out and worried about their weight, but I'm looking at myself in the mirror and I'm doing all these diets and sending them that message. So doing it for something greater, I think definitely is a big piece of it, is understanding your why. And it has to be bigger than ourselves a lot of the time.
Absolutely. Oh, that's a really good point. You are a powerful being, and it's really hard to feel that way if you're stressed, overwhelmed, or routinely overriding your body's cries for rest, nourishment, movement, and joy. You deserve to make time to take care of yourself and to enjoy your life, not just get through the day. If you are ready to stop putting yourself last on your own to-do list, you're invited to claim one of the last few spots for the May round of Level Up Your Life, my transformation incubator. We focus on the basics of self-care, but the kind of evolution people experience goes so much deeper. They talk about having more confidence in expressing themselves, finding their voices. They feel stronger, lighter, happier, clearer, and way more stress resilient. Like Rachel, who shares, I'm feeling more comfortable and present in my body, and I can feel the empowerment that comes with that, both physically and also in terms of strengthened boundaries. Thank you for this and for keeping me on this journey of learning, deepening, and growing. It's really an incredible community of conscious women who are serious about showing up differently in the world and living in alignment with the person they know themselves to be. So if you're ready to start living powerfully, I'd love to talk to you. Head to brodywelch.com/level-up and schedule your free call. We'll see if it's a good fit. Now back to the show. The aspect of digestion and intuition is interesting to me because as we clean up our diets, a lot of times our cravings get smarter. Like we stop wanting the things that ultimately make us feel like crap, and that actually in Chinese medicine, like when we're digesting well and we're giving ourselves food that is appropriate for our bodies, there it burns cleanly. Like there's not this leftover residue that kind of hangs out, that can fog our thinking, that can get in the way of our intuition, that can make us feel heavy and sluggish even if we're not gaining weight, and that can lead to just what we call dampness in the body that manifests in all sorts of different ways. And I'm wondering if you can speak to just the fact that like that we don't actually need somebody to tell us what we need to eat, that there is that how we can start intuiting if we are still maybe craving things like sugar, or things that ultimately, like, we know sugar is inflammatory, we know that sugar is not good for us in all these different ways, but if there still is that craving, how can we get our cravings to smarten up?
Yeah, so I think there's a few different questions in there. I think, just starting to go back to when our body doesn't feel good, it's really hard for us to listen to our intuition. So that's why I do both mindset and nutrition, because the nutrition piece is important. If you're continuously eating foods that don't make you feel good, it can be hard to listen to your body and know, be able to hear your intuition. But essentially, as humans, when we're born, we know a lot of these. We know when we're hungry, we know when we're full, we know what foods we like, we know what foods we don't like. If you just watch a toddler, you'll see that they intuitively know that. And as we grow up, our different experiences as eaters change, or kind of block that intuition, or we stop listening to that intuition because of either certain rules, or we have to eat at certain times, or we've been on multiple diets, or we're told as children we have to clean our plate. Like all of these different factors really influence our choices. And what helps is to come back to the basics of learning how to listen to that intuition, because really truly, the body doesn't always want sugar. It's the mind that's controlling that. Like if you really let yourself eat sugar, un, un like unconditionally allowed yourself to eat sugar, eventually your body's going to tell you, like, I don't want that anymore. It's going to stop you from having it. So you're not going to want it all the time. The body doesn't do that. It wants a variety of nutrients. It wants healthy food if left to its own devices. So I think the cravings part can definitely be involved with emotions. It's a very big piece. It's either that there's a physiological imbalance or an emotional imbalance. That's basically what cravings are telling us. It's telling us that there's something out of balance. So then we have to go look at what is out of balance. Did I wait too long to eat? So is my blood sugar out of balance? Did I not get enough sleep? That can definitely bring up cravings. What is going on for me emotionally right now? Am I tired? Am I stressed? Am I anxious? Am I bored? So there's this huge emotional component with cravings, and everyone just says, well, stop eating sugar. Well, why is it that we know that we shouldn't eat sugar, but we still do it? It's because there's emotional and mindset drivers that drive us to those behaviors, which is what we need to address. So it's not the sugar that's the problem.
Yeah.
It's not that we don't know that sugar is bad for us. It's that there's other areas that can be addressed, and it doesn't all come down to willpower. That's what that's where we get stuck. We think that we can't control ourselves. Well, there's a reason why that's happening, and I mentioned a few of those possible factors of why you might feel like you have no willpower.
Well, and all of those things deplete willpower. Like
Hmm.
what
Yeah.
willpower we do have
Uh-huh.
goes away when we have unregulated blood sugar, or when we haven't had enough sleep, or when we're stressed. That it then our good intentions will go out the window, and I find far more fruitful to get curious about what's driving what's driving the craving, as opposed to like just creating space between the thought and the action to give yourself time to figure out whether that's really the choice you want to make.
Correct. Yeah. And even just if you notice that you're having a craving, putting a timer on for 5 minutes and doing some breathing. And then at the end of that timer, if it goes off and you still want that food, then you can go have it. But we're doing a pattern interrupt and we're allowing you to, get out of this kind of clinging on to this thought about the craving. And the more that you do that, the sooner the cravings really start to shift and go away.
Awesome. So, Amy, if people are interested in connecting with you, how can they find you?
Yeah, so at the moment, the best way to reach out to me is through my website, which is nourishedbalance.com. And that's NOURISHED, so nourishedbalance.com. And I do reaching out to me through there is the best way to contact me. I also have I'm on Instagram, both under Nourished Balance and Spiritual Nutritionist. So I'm doing a little transition at the moment, but those are the places that you can find me the best.
Awesome. Any last words for our listeners?
Oh, last words for the listeners. I just feel that a lot of times women and I guess a lot of people feel that they're alone in their struggle and that they're the only ones who are struggling with eating and weight and, losing weight and gaining weight and just being frustrated on a daily basis. And I just really want to remind you that this is a much bigger collective issue than just a personal issue, and that you don't have to do it alone, and knowing that you're not alone in this challenge. I think that's really important because oftentimes we tend to isolate ourselves, and it's not something that we feel comfortable talking with out loud. So knowing that you're not alone and really, working with either a coach or working in a group setting with other women, getting support and supporting other women can be part of your healing journey as well.
Absolutely. You're so not alone. It is so it is so ubiquitous out
Mm-hmm.
there. And I couldn't agree more that having support and accountability while you're trying to change something like this, it takes time, and having that support and accountability, especially with other people going through the same thing, people working in groups are 7 times more likely to hit their goals.
Mm-hmm. I was trying to think of what that statistic was this morning. I was actually going to go back and look it up. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Well, Amy, this has been so fun. It's great to talk to you. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening today. For more episodes of A Healthy Curiosity, you can visit the iTunes store. If you appreciated today's show, please leave us a review. This helps other people to find the podcast. You could also head to brodywelch.com, where you can find free self-care resources, learn more about Chinese medicine, and let me know what you'd like to hear about on future episodes. I'd love to hear from you. Till next time, be good to yourself.